Some memories never fade. They have fur, bright eyes, and the gift of loving us without saying a word. Because every dog carries a story, and maybe a part of yours. Get ready to discover more than a breed. Discover a lifelong companion.
In the depths of the Forbidden City, where absolute power manifested through millennial rituals and sacred traditions, there existed a secret that few knew beyond the red and golden walls of the Imperial Palace. This secret did not involve political conspiracies, secret treaties, or hidden treasures, but rather small creatures with silky fur and expressive eyes that occupied a unique place in the hierarchy of the Chinese court. Pekingese dogs, known as lion dogs or sun dogs, were much more than simple pets to the emperors of the Qing dynasty and its predecessors. They were living symbols of divine power, spiritual guardians, and inseparable companions who literally lived in the sleeves of imperial garments, a privilege that no other living being, human or animal, ever enjoyed in China's millennial history. The origin of this extraordinary tradition goes back to legends that blend with real history, creating a fascinating tapestry of mythology and fact. According to ancient narratives transmitted from generation to generation among the palace eunuchs and court ladies, the Pekingese descended directly from a lion who fell in love with a marmoset, a small monkey. The lion, moved by impossible love, begged the Buddhist god of mercy to reduce him to the size of his beloved while maintaining his brave heart and noble spirit. The request was granted, and from this union the first Pekingese dogs were born, who inherited the bravery and majesty of the lion, combined with the diminutive size and agility of the monkey. This legend was not just a charming story told to entertain the nobility, but represented the very essence of what made the Pekingese so special in the eyes of the emperors. The dog embodied the perfect duality between power and delicacy, grandeur and smallness, strength and tenderness. For centuries, the breeding of these extraordinary dogs was a state secret, guarded with fanatic zeal. The imperial breeders, who dedicated their entire lives to perfecting the breed, worked in special pavilions within the Forbidden City, where they developed sophisticated selection techniques that resulted in the Pekingese we know today. These dogs were bred specifically to be small enough to fit in the wide sleeves of imperial garments, which were made with special openings and internal reinforcements to accommodate the precious animals. The sleeves of Chinese imperial clothing were not simple extensions of fabric, but true works of textile engineering, made of the highest quality silk, embroidered with gold and silver threads, and decorated with dragons, phoenixes, and other auspicious symbols. These sleeves could measure up to 1 meter in length when extended. The interior was lined with soft silk, and in some cases even with ermine fur or other luxurious materials, creating a comfortable environment for the small dogs that resided there. The practice of carrying Pekingese in the sleeves was not merely ornamental or capricious. It had deep purposes rooted in Chinese cosmology and beliefs about spiritual protection. It was believed that Pekingese possessed the ability to ward off evil spirits and negative energy, functioning as mystical guardians of the emperor. Their constant proximity to the imperial body created an invisible protective barrier that no spell or curse could penetrate. Furthermore, in a court full of intrigues, poisonings, and assassination attempts, the Pekingese served as a primitive but effective form of danger detection. These dogs were trained from puppies to recognize suspicious odors and strange behaviors, and many stories circulated about Pekingese who saved the lives of their imperial owners by alerting them to poisoned food or the presence of intruders. The training of an imperial Pekingese began practically from birth. The puppies were carefully selected by breeders who evaluated not only physical characteristics such as size, coat, and conformation, but also temperament, intelligence, and even auspicious signs in their behavior. A puppy born during an important festival or that presented specific marks on its coat could be considered especially fortunate and destined to serve the emperor himself. Once selected, the puppies went through an intensive socialization process that prepared them for the peculiar life they would lead. They needed to learn to remain quiet and calm for long periods inside the sleeves, not to be frightened by loud noises or sudden movements, and to respond instantly to the subtle commands of their owners. The imperial trainers developed a complex system of signals that allowed emperors to communicate with their dogs without words or obvious gestures. A light touch with the index finger could mean for the dog to remain absolutely still, while a specific movement of the wrist indicated that it was safe for the animal to move or even leave the sleeve. This silent communication was essential during state ceremonies, audiences with foreign ambassadors, and other formal events where the presence of the dogs needed to remain discreet. Some historical records suggest that certain emperors developed such deep bonds with their Pekingese that communication between them transcended even these elaborate signals, reaching an almost telepathic level of mutual understanding. The diet of imperial Pekingese was as elaborate as that of the emperors themselves. Specialized cooks prepared specific meals for the dogs, using rare and precious ingredients. Quail meat, bird's nest, chicken liver marinated in special sauces, perfumed rice cooked in bone broth, and even small portions of caviar were part of the canine menu. It was believed that a superior diet would result not only in healthier dogs, but also in shinier coat and more balanced temperament. Furthermore, certain food combinations were considered beneficial for different aspects of canine health according to the principles of traditional Chinese medicine. Herbs such as ginseng, lotus root, and jujube were incorporated into meals to strengthen the vitality of the animals and ensure longevity. The care of the coat of Imperial Pekingese was an art in itself. Teams of servants dedicated daily hours to brushing, cleaning, and maintaining the luxuriant fur of these dogs. Special brushes made of bamboo, wild boar bristles, and even badger hair were used for different purposes. The brushing technique followed specific patterns that had been perfected over generations, ensuring that the coat not only looked beautiful, but was also healthy and free of tangles. During certain seasons of the year, aromatic oils extracted from rare flowers were applied, which delicately perfumed the coat and, by extension, the imperial garments themselves. The subtle aroma of the Pekingese became so associated with the imperial presence that on some occasions, people at court could detect the approach of the emperor simply by the characteristic perfume that his dogs carried. The sleeves that housed the Pekingese were designed with remarkable ingenuity. Imperial tailors created special compartments that allowed the dogs to settle comfortably without visibly distorting the silhouette of the garment. Small strategically positioned openings allowed adequate ventilation, while fine silk nets prevented the dogs from accidentally falling if the emperor made sudden movements. In colder climates, the sleeves could be lined with warmer materials, and on hot days, lighter and more breathable fabrics were used. Some special ceremonial garments had sleeves designed to accommodate not one, but two Pekingese, one on each side, symbolizing balance and harmony, fundamental concepts in Chinese philosophy. The presence of Pekingese in imperial sleeves also served subtle diplomatic purposes. When the emperor received foreign visitors or ambassadors from distant kingdoms, the occasional movement or sound coming from his sleeves created an aura of mystery and power. Some records from European diplomats who visited the Chinese court in the 17th and 18th centuries mention their surprise and fascination upon discovering that the emperor carried live dogs in his clothes. For many foreigners, this was yet another demonstration of the inconceivable wealth and eccentricity of the Chinese court, reinforcing the image of an empire so powerful and abundant that even its pets lived in luxury that surpassed the life of nobles in other nations. The status of Pekingese in the palace hierarchy was extraordinary. They had their own servants, their own quarters decorated with miniature furniture, and even their own lineages documented with the same genealogical care applied to the human imperial family. Pekingese of the purest lineage, those whose ancestries could be traced for several generations back to the original palace dogs, were considered so valuable that their births were recorded in official books and celebrated with special ceremonies. When an imperial Pekingese died, it frequently received an elaborate funeral with Buddhist and Taoist rituals conducted by monks, and was buried in special cemeteries within the palace grounds, sometimes in small but ornate tombs that reflected the importance of the animal in life. The relationship between emperors and their Pekingese transcended the typical bond between human and pet. For many emperors, especially those who lived isolated and solitary lives within the Forbidden City, surrounded by rigid protocols and people whose interactions were dictated by etiquette and political interest, the Pekingese offered something precious and rare, genuine and unconditional companionship. These dogs did not bow to the emperor out of obligation or fear, but out of true affection. They had no political agendas, did not compete for power, did not conspire or betray. In a world of constant masks and performances, the Pekingese allowed emperors to simply be human, at least in private moments when they were alone in their chambers, with their small companions curled up in their laps or resting placidly in the sleeves of their sleeping garments. There are touching accounts of emperors who, in their final days, refused to separate from their Pekingese even as death approached. One emperor of the Qing dynasty reportedly insisted that his favorite Pekingese remain by his side throughout his final agony, and ordered that, after his death, the dog be cared for with special honors for the rest of its natural life. Another emperor reportedly had elaborate portraits painted of his Pekingese, which were displayed in his private quarters with the same reverence reserved for portraits of venerable ancestors. These stories reveal the emotional depth of the connections between emperors and their small canine companions. The controlled breeding of Pekingese within the Forbidden City resulted in distinctive characteristics that differentiated true imperial Pekingese from any other dogs. Besides the compact size essential to fit comfortably in imperial sleeves, these dogs developed distinctive flattened faces, large expressive eyes that seem to reflect ancient wisdom, and that luxuriant coat that flows like a royal mantle. Coat colors also had specific meanings in imperial symbolism. Golden Pekingese were considered especially auspicious, associated with the sun and yang energy. Those with black coats were rare and valued for their association with protection against dark forces. White Pekingese symbolized purity, while those with multicolored coats were seen as bridges between different elements and energies of the universe. The fall of the Qing dynasty in 1912 marked the end of an era for Imperial Pekingese. When Western troops invaded the Forbidden City during the Boxer Rebellion in 1900, some Pekingese were taken as spoils of war, taking the breed for the first time beyond Chinese borders. A female Pekingese named Luti was presented to Queen Victoria of England, causing a sensation in the British court and initiating Western fascination with the breed. However, these dogs were no longer the true Imperial Pekingese of the sleeves, as they had been separated from the meticulous breeding system and the traditions that shaped them for centuries. Within the Imperial quarters, Pekingese had access to privileges that would make many humans of the time envious. They slept in specially made beds, with silk cushions stuffed with feathers from the rarest birds. During Beijing's harsh winter, small bronze heaters were placed near their beds to ensure they never felt cold. In the scorching summer, servants fanned the dogs with peacock feather fans and offered them chilled water flavored with flower petals. Some particularly favored Pekingese even had their own personal musicians who played soft melodies to calm them when they became agitated or restless. The architecture of the quarters destined for Pekingese within the palace was a marvel of miniature design. Small pavilions were built with the same attention to detail, and feng shui principles applied to buildings intended for humans of the imperial family. Miniature gardens with carefully selected stones, small artificial lakes, and dwarf plants created aesthetically perfect environments where dogs could stroll and play. These gardens were maintained by specialized gardeners who dedicated their entire careers to ensuring that each element was in perfect harmony, creating spaces that promoted health, happiness, and longevity for the imperial dogs. The role of Pekingese in the palace's religious and spiritual ceremonies was significant. During certain Taoist and Buddhist rituals conducted by emperors, Pekingese were considered intermediaries between the physical and spiritual worlds. Their presence during meditations and prayers was seen as beneficial, amplifying the emperor's spiritual intentions and helping to connect him with superior cosmic forces. Monks and priests who served at court frequently blessed the Pekingese with special mantras and created protective amulets that were delicately attached to the dog's collars, made of silk, embroidered with gold threads and decorated with small precious stones. Stories about the exceptional intelligence of Imperial Pekingese abounded at court. It was said that some of these dogs could understand hundreds of different commands and even anticipate their owner's needs before they were expressed. A particularly famous tale narrated about a Pekingese named Pearl of the Moon who reportedly saved his emperor from assassination by detecting poison in a wine cup and knocking over the drink before the ruler consumed it. Another account spoke of a Pekingese who could distinguish between dozens of different people just by the sound of their footsteps, alerting his imperial owner about the identity of who was approaching even when they were still out of sight. The veterinary medicine practiced on Imperial Pekingese was centuries ahead of its time. Specialized doctors, versed both in traditional Chinese medicine and techniques developed specifically for dogs, constantly monitored the animal's health. They performed regular examinations, checking the dog's pulse at specific points on their paws, observing the tongue and eyes for signs of internal imbalances, and prescribing personalized treatments that included canine acupuncture, therapeutic massages, and complex herbal formulas. When a Pekingese became ill, no effort or expense was spared to ensure its recovery. Rare medicinal ingredients were imported from distant regions, and the best healers of the empire were summoned to consult on the case. The concept of carrying Pekingese in the sleeves also had practical implications beyond symbolism and spiritual protection. In an era without central heating, during the brutal winters of northern China, the dogs served as natural sources of warmth. The body heat of the Pekingese helped keep the emperor's hands and arms warm during long outdoor ceremonies or while crossing the vast frozen courtyards of the Forbidden City. This practical function, combined with all the other benefits, made Pekingese truly indispensable companions for emperors. The laws that protected Imperial Pekingese were rigorous and implacable. Stealing or harming one of these dogs was considered a crime against the emperor himself, punishable by death. Even treating an Imperial Pekingese with disrespect or negligence could result in severe punishments for the servants responsible for their care. On the other hand, those who demonstrated exceptional skill in dealing with the dogs could ascend to positions of prestige within the palace. Known as guardians of the imperial dogs, these individuals formed their own hierarchy, with titles, distinctive uniforms, and considerable authority over specific aspects of palatial life related to the animals. The reproduction of Pekingese was a state matter treated with extreme seriousness. Meticulous records were kept of each mating, documenting not only the lineages of the parents, but also the astrological conditions at the moment of conception. The phase phase of the moon and other factors considered important according to the beliefs of the time. Court astrologers were consulted to determine the most auspicious moments to allow matings, ensuring that puppies were born under favorable stars. The resulting litters were carefully examined, with each puppy being evaluated not only for its physical characteristics, but also for signs that could indicate special destiny or spiritual significance. During great celebrations and imperial festivals, Pekingese played important ceremonial roles. In parades and processions, some of these dogs were carried in tiny litters made especially for them, decorated as elaborately as the litters that transported members of the imperial family. Others remained in the emperor's sleeves throughout the event, their presence invisible but known to all, adding a layer of mystery and majesty to the imperial figure. In some specific festivals dedicated to prosperity and good luck, selected Pekingese were presented publicly and received offerings of food and small gifts from the nobility, who believed that honoring the imperial dogs would bring blessings and imperial favor. The education of imperial children often included carefully supervised interactions with Pekingese. It was believed that learning to care for and respect these sacred animals taught young princes and princesses valuable lessons about responsibility, compassion, and the appropriate exercise of power over beings under their protection. Children of the imperial family who demonstrated cruelty or carelessness with Pekingese were severely reprimanded, as such behaviors were seen as worrying indicators of character that could compromise their suitability for future leadership roles. On the other hand, those who developed genuinely affectionate bonds with the dogs were praised and encouraged, as this suggested the ability to govern with wisdom and benevolence. Pekingese also served as diplomatic gifts of inestimable value, although this was extremely rare. Occasionally, when particularly important relations needed to be established or strengthened with neighboring kingdoms or tributary states, the emperor could present a carefully selected Pekingese to a foreign ruler. Such a gift was considered an extraordinary honor, a sign of imperial favor that immensely elevated the recipient's prestige. The gifted dogs came accompanied by detailed instructions about their care, servants trained to attend to them, and sufficient supplies of specialized food to last months. Receiving an imperial Pekingese was not just gaining a pet, but establishing a symbolic connection with the Son of Heaven himself, as the Chinese emperor was known. Imperial Chinese art is replete with representations of Pekingese, immortalizing these dogs in paintings, sculptures, porcelains, and embroideries. Court artists dedicated countless hours capturing the essence of Pekingese in their works, and the ability to portray these dogs with precision and beauty was considered a mark of exceptional artistic talent. Silk paintings showed Pekingese playing in imperial gardens, resting at the feet of empresses, or gracefully emerging from elaborate garment sleeves. Sculptures in jade, bronze, and porcelain represented dogs in various poses, from alert and majestic to relaxed and playful. These works of art were not mere decorations, but objects of spiritual power that were believed to bring protection and good luck to the spaces where they were displayed. Some of the most valuable paintings in the history of Chinese art include representations of specific imperial Pekingese, animals whose names and stories have been preserved through the centuries thanks to the meticulous work of court artists. Chinese literature also celebrated Pekingese in diverse ways. Imperial poets composed elegant verses comparing the beauty of the dogs to the rarest flowers, their loyalty to bamboo that bends but never breaks, their courage to the tiger that protects its mountains. Some of these poems were inscribed on calligraphic scrolls that decorated imperial quarters, constant reminders of the virtues that Pekingese represented. Folk tales and legends about miraculous Pekingese were transmitted orally among generations of palace servants, creating a rich mythology that further elevated the mystical status of these animals. Stories of Pekingese who spoke in human languages, who could fly short distances, or who lived hundreds of years circulated widely, blending with real historical accounts until it became impossible to completely distinguish fact from fantasy. The selection process for a Pekingese destined to live in imperial sleeves was extremely rigorous and could take months. Breeders presented their best puppies to a commission of experts that included imperial veterinarians, astrologers, experienced trainers, and occasionally members of the imperial family itself. Each puppy was subjected to a series of tests that evaluated temperament, health, intelligence, and even energetic compatibility with the emperor. The tests included exposing puppies to stressful situations to verify how they reacted, offering various types of food to evaluate their preferences and digestion, and observing how they interacted with humans and other animals. Only puppies that demonstrated the perfect combination of all desired qualities were considered worthy of serving in imperial sleeves. The transition of a selected puppy to its new life in the sleeves was gradual and carefully orchestrated. Initially, the Pekingese spent only a few minutes a day inside a simulated sleeve, being generously rewarded with treats and affection after each successful session. Gradually, the time was extended until the dog could remain comfortably for hours. In parallel, the puppy was exposed to the sounds, smells, and movements it would encounter in the emperor's daily life, becoming accustomed to the noise of ceremonies, the incense burned in rituals, the sudden movements when the emperor stood up or gestured. This entire preparation process could last several months, and only when trainers were absolutely convinced that the dog was ready was it formally presented to the emperor. The ceremony of presenting a new Pekingese to the emperor was a significant event in the palace calendar. Held on an astrologically auspicious day, the ceremony included ritual purifications of the dog, blessings from Buddhist and Taoist monks, and the formal presentation of the animal to the emperor by breeders and trainers who bowed deeply while offering the Pekingese on an embroidered silk cushion. The emperor then held the dog for the first time, a moment considered so significant that it was frequently recorded by court scribes and artists commissioned to capture the scene. If the emperor and dog demonstrated immediate affinity, this was seen as an extremely auspicious sign for the kingdom. If there was any hesitation or discomfort, the acclimatization process continued until perfect harmony was achieved. The symbolism of Pekingese deeply permeated imperial Chinese cosmology. These dogs were seen as terrestrial manifestations of the celestial lions that guarded the gates of Buddhist paradise. In Chinese iconography, guardian lions always appear in pairs flanking temple and palace entrances, a male playing with a ball representing the world, and a female protecting a cub that symbolizes the continuity of life. Imperial Pekingese were considered living versions of these mystical lions, and their presence close to the emperor created a direct connection between the earthly ruler and the cosmic forces that governed the universe. This belief was not empty superstition, but an integral part of a complex philosophical system that saw correspondences and connections between all levels of existence, from the most mundane to the most transcendent. During periods of crisis, war, or political instability, the presence of Pekingese in imperial sleeves acquired even deeper meaning. It was believed that these dogs could absorb and neutralize negative energies that threatened the emperor and, by extension, the entire empire. Some historical accounts mention emperors who, during military campaigns, refused to go to the battlefield without their Pekingese, convinced that the dogs were living talismans essential for victory. Generals and military commanders who initially might have seen the dogs as frivolities quickly learned to respect the importance the emperor attributed to these animals and ensured that the needs of the Pekingese were met even in the most austere conditions of military campaigns. The death of a particularly beloved Pekingese could plunge the entire court into mourning. The emperor frequently decreed periods of official mourning during which certain festive activities were suspended. Elaborate tombs were built, sometimes taking months to complete, with funerary chambers decorated with paintings representing celestial gardens where it was believed the dog's spirit now resided. Favorite objects of the deceased Pekingese were buried with it, including toys, food bowls, cushions, and even small representations of servants in terracotta, echoing ancient imperial funerary practices, but in miniaturized scale, appropriate for dogs. Elaborate Buddhist ceremonies were performed to ensure that the Pekingese's soul had a peaceful transition to the next realm of existence. The influence of Pekingese on Chinese fashion and design was substantial. Embroidery patterns developed to decorate the sleeves that housed the dogs eventually inspired designs used on other garments and textiles. Pekingese motifs began to appear on porcelains, tapestries, and other decorative objects, becoming recognized symbols of refinement and connection with the imperial court. Jewelers created brooches and ornaments in the shape of Pekingese using precious metals and gemstones, pieces that were highly coveted by the nobility and served as indicators of social status. The popularity of these designs spread beyond China's borders, influencing the aesthetics of neighboring cultures that admired and sought to emulate the splendor of the Chinese court. The guardians and breeders of Imperial Pekingese developed a body of specialized knowledge that was transmitted through family lineages. Entire families dedicated generations to the service of imperial dogs, accumulating practical wisdom about breeding, training, healthcare, and even spiritual aspects related to the animals. This knowledge was considered too valuable to be written, being transmitted orally from master to apprentice through years of practical learning. Secrets about specific breeding techniques that produced desirable characteristics, methods for treating particular diseases that affected Pekingese, and even formulas for special ointments and tonics were jealously guarded within these families. Some of these secrets were completely lost with the end of the imperial dynasty, representing an irreparable loss of knowledge accumulated over centuries. Pekingese. The daily routine of an Imperial Pekingese was structured with the same precision that governed all aspects of palace life. The day began at dawn when specialized servants gently awakened the dogs, offering them fresh water flavored with chrysanthemum petals. This was followed by a brushing session that could last an hour, during which every inch of coat was carefully combed and examined to ensure perfect health. After brushing, the dogs received their breakfast, a balanced meal prepared according to traditional Chinese medicine principles to promote vitality. The morning was dedicated to exercise and play in private gardens, always under careful supervision. In the afternoon, after a light meal, Pekingese often rested, preparing for their evening functions when they might be called to accompany the emperor in his sleeves during audiences, ceremonies, or simply while he conducted state business. The continuous training of Imperial Pekingese never completely ceased, even after a dog reached maturity and had served in the sleeves for years. Regular reinforcement sessions ensured that dogs kept their skills sharp and continued responding to subtle commands with precision. New tricks and behaviors were occasionally taught, keeping the dogs' minds stimulated and engaged. Experienced trainers constantly observed the animals, looking for any signs of decline in abilities or health that might indicate the need for intervention. This constant attention ensured that Imperial Pekingese maintained the highest standard of performance throughout their lives. The retirement of an Imperial Pekingese from active duties in the sleeves was treated with great ceremony and respect. When a dog aged to the point where carrying out daily functions became uncomfortable or excessively tiring, it was formally retired in a ceremony that recognized its years of loyal service. The emperor often granted honorary titles to these veteran dogs, elevating them to positions of prestige within the palace's canine hierarchy. Retired Pekingese spent their final years in absolute comfort, residing in special pavilions where they received even more attentive care than before. They were regularly visited by members of the imperial family who wished to pay respect to old companions, and their needs were attended to by dedicated servants who considered it a privilege to care for these venerable animals who had served so closely to the Son of Heaven. Stories about the wisdom and dignity of retired Pekingese were widely shared at court, inspiring respect for longevity and faithful service. The relationship between Pekingese and empresses and imperial concubines was particularly notable. While emperors were the primary guardians of these dogs, the women of the court developed their own deep bonds with the animals. Many empresses kept their own Pekingese who, although they did not live in sleeves as the emperor's dogs did, enjoyed similar privileges and luxurious care. Imperial women often actively involved themselves in the breeding and training of Pekingese, and some of the most skilled breeders in imperial history were women who dedicated decades to perfecting the breed. Empress Dowager Cixi, one of the most powerful rulers in Chinese history, was known for her passionate devotion to Pekingese and is credited with establishing some of the most refined breeding standards that defined the modern breed. The gardens where Imperial Pekingese spent their free time were true miniature paradises, designed according to deep aesthetic and philosophical principles. Each element, from the positioning of specific rocks to the selection of plants and trees, was chosen to create perfect harmony and promote positive energy. Small artificial streams flowed through the gardens, creating soft sounds of running water that had calming effects on the dogs. Miniature bridges, small pavilions, and even small decorative temples created stimulating environments where Pekingese could explore and play. Specialized gardeners maintained these spaces in impeccable condition, ensuring that each season brought new flowers and aromas that enriched the dog's experience. During spring, peach trees in bloom perfumed the air. In summer, lotus bloomed in small lakes. In autumn, colorful chrysanthemums were carefully arranged. And even in winter, perennial plants and dwarf pines maintained the beauty of the gardens. The interaction between Imperial Pekingese and other palace animals was carefully managed. Although the Forbidden City housed various animals, including magnificent horses, exotic birds, and even large felines occasionally kept as symbols of power, Pekingese rarely came into direct contact with these other creatures. This separation protected the small dogs from possible dangers and also maintained their ritual purity and special status. However, there were controlled exceptions. Some songbirds were kept in ornate cages in the same quarters as Pekingese, and it was believed that the melodious singing of birds had beneficial effects on the dog's temperament. Colorful koi fish swam in lakes within the Pekingese gardens, and observing these fish was considered a meditative and calming activity for the dogs. The meticulous documentation kept about Imperial Pekingese over the centuries represents one of the oldest and most complete canine genealogical records in the world. Books bound in silk contained not only detailed family trees tracking lineages for dozens of generations, but also precise physical descriptions of each dog, notes about their temperament and personality, records of their health throughout life, and even anecdotes about notable behaviors or significant events in their lives. These records were kept in special libraries within the palace, carefully protected from humidity, insects, and other agents of deterioration. Specialized scribes dedicated their careers to maintaining and updating these records, work considered honorable and important for the continuity of imperial traditions. Many of these historical records were lost during the political upheavals that marked the end of the Qing dynasty and subsequent periods of war and revolution in China, but surviving fragments provide fascinating windows into this unique aspect of imperial Chinese history. The psychological impact of the constant presence of Pekingese on emperors should not be underestimated. In a position of absolute power, where solitude was paradoxically inevitable, where every human interaction was colored by hierarchy, protocol, and often hidden motivations, Pekingese offered something precious and rare, a genuine relationship not corrupted by political ambition. This constant companionship, literally within arm's reach inside imperial sleeves, provided invaluable emotional comfort. Modern studies on the therapeutic benefits of human-animal interaction confirm what Chinese emperors intuitively understood centuries ago, that the presence of pets reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, and promotes general emotional well-being. For emperors who carried the weight of governing millions of subjects and making decisions that could affect the fate of entire nations, the silent comfort of a Pekingese resting in the sleeves of their garments was not triviality, but psychological necessity. The tradition of Pekingese in imperial sleeves also reflects broader Chinese cultural values about the relationship between humans and nature. Unlike some Western philosophical traditions that emphasize the separation and domination of nature by man, traditional Chinese thought values harmony and integration with the natural world. Pekingese represented this philosophy in living form, creatures of nature that had been refined through centuries of careful breeding, but that maintained their animal essence, existing in perfect balance with their human companions. This perspective manifested in dog care practices that respected their natural needs while elevating them to extraordinary levels of refinement. Pekingese were not forced into unnatural behaviors, but rather gently encouraged to express their instincts in ways compatible with palatial life. The legacy of Imperial Chinese Pekingese extends far beyond the historical and geographical boundaries of the empire. When these dogs finally reached the Western world in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, they caused immediate sensation. European and American breeders, fascinated by the breed, established their own breeding programs, though without access to the secret techniques and knowledge accumulated by imperial breeders over millennia. The modern Pekingese breed standard, recognized by international cynological organizations, is a direct descendant of those imperial dogs, though inevitably modified by decades of breeding outside the original context. Modern Pekingese maintain many of the characteristics that made them so special to Chinese emperors, including that luxuriant coat, distinctive flattened face, large expressive eyes, and personality that combines dignity with affection. However, connoisseurs recognize that something intangible was lost when Pekingese left the Forbidden City, a special quality cultivated through centuries of meticulous breeding in a unique environment that can never be completely replicated. The practice of carrying Pekingese in imperial sleeves remains as one of the most extraordinary and poetic examples of the relationship between humans and domestic animals in world history. It transcends simple ownership of pets, elevating itself to a form of art that integrated animal breeding, textile design, spiritual philosophy, and emotional companionship in a unique synthesis. The sleeves of Chinese imperial garments, with their small canine occupants, symbolize deep truths about power and vulnerability, grandeur and intimacy, tradition and innovation. They reminded that even the most powerful rulers are, in the end, humans needing companionship and comfort, and that the smallest creatures can play extraordinarily significant roles in our lives. Today, when we admire a modern Pekingese with its flowing coat and dignified gait, we are looking at direct descendants of those extraordinary dogs who once resided in the sleeves of the sons of heaven, living guardians of emperors who ruled the most populous empire and one of the oldest civilizations on earth. Each Pekingese carries in its genes the memory of those centuries of refinement, of that extraordinary life within the Forbidden City, of those silent moments inside silk sleeves when emperors and dogs shared a connection that transcended words and crossed the boundaries between human and animal, mortal and divine.